There's an unwritten rule, perhaps because it is so obvious that writing it down never seemed necessary. If you drag a country into war and then lose that war, you have to step down or be left out to hang. Upside down. This is not about revenge, it's about public health. War demands extraordinary sacrifices, though not from those in power. For those in the room where decisions are made, going to war is a painless choice. In fact, it can come with plenty of perks: a dazzling career, a place in history books, and even staggering opportunities for personal enrichment. Just look at the inner circle that led Ukraine to disaster in recent years. This is why it is absolutely essential to uphold an old tradition. If you place that bet and lose, the price to pay must be astronomical. It's the only deterrent we have to ensure that such a decision is not made lightly. Anyone who rallies others with the infamous call to arms, "Let's fight, you go first," must at the very least know that if they miscalculate, they will meet a grim fate. And when it comes to the proxy war in Ukraine, saying that the European ruling classes and their chorus of bargain-bin propagandists miscalculated would be an understatement. The entire imperialist camp has been humiliated, starting with its leading nation. Every major objective has been missed. Spectacularly, Russia has neither been defeated nor dismantled. It hasn't even been isolated, quite the opposite. If anything, it is the imperialist bloc itself that looks increasingly cut off. Putin is alive and well, politically stronger than ever, just like his allies Ramzan Kadyrov and Alexander Lukashenko. The same cannot be said for Biden, Boris Johnson, or Sanna Marin. All the territories seized by Russia are irreversibly lost. Ukraine will not be joining NATO, and Russia will not be paying any war reparations. This applies to both Washington and Brussels. But unlike Washington, Brussels wanted to go the extra mile. Losing just war at a time seemed amateurish. So we went ahead and lost two. Washington, after all, was fighting two wars at once. The primary one against the end of unipolarity, which went very badly, and the other one against Eurasian integration, fearing that over time this process could turn its European vassals into an autonomous pole with the emerging multipolar order. And in that fight, Washington won by a landslide. So much so that today, the new US administration can at least partially offset the political, geopolitical, and economic cost of its defeat against Russia with the dividends of its triumph over Europe. The price that has already been and will continue to be offloaded onto the backs of European citizens is immeasurable. European industry has been utterly wiped out. The purchasing power of our wages is in free fall. Our savings are flowing relentlessly across the ocean, fueling the very technological and financial monopolies that Washington uses to tighten its grip on us. And if Trump follows through on his threats, this is just the appetizer. In the past, entire ruling classes have been sent to the gallows for far less. The history of revolutions, after all, is largely the history of people rising up when forced to bear the cost of a war they never wanted. The most famous case, of course, is the October Revolution, which first toppled the Tsarist regime and then the provisional government, both of which had been offloading the humiliation of the front lines onto the population. Less well known is the role of war in the French Revolution, where the gaping hole in public finances caused by France's involvement in the American War of Independence played a decisive role in sparking the uprising. The consequences of war have played a decisive role in revolutions across the world. In China, in Iran, in Turkey, and even in the downfall of the regime in Portugal. Now, we're not necessarily saying we need to start a revolution tomorrow morning. I mean, at 11 I got my Mandarin class, then the kids have their swimming lessons, and in the evening my fiancé has yoga. But why on earth should we be the only idiots in history to keep in power a ruling class that forced us to bear the consequences of a deranged war? Especially since the Second War, the one waged by US oligarchies against the living standards of European citizens, is still in full swing and is set to become even more brutal in the coming years than it already has been for the past 3. Are we really so stupid as to let ourselves be ferried into this storm by the same runaways who have left us in a mess up until today? That's why, to us, the only reasonable outcome is crystal clear. They all have to go. Every single one of those who played a role in dragging each European country into this catastrophe must quite simply step down and disappear from public life. They can spend their days at the park with their grandkids, reflecting on their mistakes, permanently barred from holding public office. And when we say all, we mean all. Those who overnight magically transformed from Biden fans into Trump fans, just like those who are still stalling before switching sides, organizing senior citizen tours to Paris for a bit of a theatrical posturing. As long as only small counter-information channels like ours were saying the war was lost, a bit of institutional denial was to be expected. But now that the debacle is official, we struggle to understand what exactly they are still waiting for. Across Europe, at both the national level and within EU institutions, we must demand new elections. This isn't some arbitrary demand. It's pure logic. Even during the last elections, many of us already knew full well that the war they had dragged us into was irreversibly lost. But the propaganda was saying the exact opposite. The official narrative, enforced with an iron grip by state-controlled media, the only one reaching the vast majority of the population, claimed that victory was assured, that the mad dictator who had dared to defy the collective West was living on a borrowed time, and that the only issue, at most, was how to properly calibrate the humiliation we were inflicting on him. Because, after all, a crazed, bloodthirsty dictator armed with nukes is at its most dangerous when facing total annihilation. Today, this is no longer a matter of opinion. We know now, officially, that it was all lies. When voters select their representatives based on a meticulously crafted, state-sponsored campaign of lies, that selection must be considered null and void. The mandate that European citizens gave their politicians with their votes is no longer valid. And now we must give people the opportunity to elect new representatives. This time, in light of the shocking truth that has emerged with absolute clarity in recent weeks. As we fight to uphold this fundamental democratic principle, we must also build a united front among all the forces in Europe that oppose the war and are not complicit in this disaster. No more fine and sophisticated distinctions. On one side, those who sacrifice the peoples of Europe just to keep their cushy seats in the colonial administration, no matter who happens to be in the White House. On the other, those who put the real interests of European citizens first. A united front for national and continental liberation. 99 Media's parent company OTTOLINATV has already launched a campaign in Italy in the last few days to bring together around a table all the organizations and individual citizens who in recent years have opposed war propaganda. Of course, this initiative cannot be limited to Italy alone. It is all the peoples of Europe united who should find the most effective way to make their voices heard and prevent, for the first time, those responsible for the disaster from escaping accountability for their crimes and their sheer stupidity. If you too want to avoid going down in history as the most foolish generation in European history, share this video and help us build a grassroots European network of all those who have decided they won't rest until we've sent them all packing. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all next time.